Sam Elliott is good, and that's it. Today, we review both Ghost Rider and Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. This is the Superhero Pantheon. On this podcast, we take one superhero film a week. Typically, over the course of this last month, we've been doing 2 superhero films a week, and we have decided whether they should be in the pile of shame, the Superhero Pantheon, or somewhere in between. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps through the real world. We strongly encourage you to leave a 4 or 5-star review so as to help people discover this show and the great work that the folks at the real world are doing. If you would like to interact with us or send feedback, you could do so in 2 ways. First, send an email to superheropantheon@gmail.com. Second, find us on Twitter at HeroPantheon. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. And Brian, we are reviewing 2 movies this week. One of them broke you, and the other one broke me. So let's talk about the one that broke you first. Let's talk about the first Ghost Rider. This is a movie that is again directed by Mark Steven Johnson, the same person who directed 2003's Daredevil. And with this came some expectation, because at this point, Nicolas Cage was not just a straight-to VOD star. He was still a relatively big name in Hollywood, so bringing him on a project like this was a big deal. And also having Eva Mendes and Sam Elliott and Peter Fonda, of all people. This is a movie that has some star power, Brian, but it sounds like you were not impressed by any of it.
Yeah, I was so skeptical with Nick Cage when I heard about this casting years ago, because he can either swing for the fences and miss, or he can hit a home run, right? He's hit home runs before. He's a great actor, but sometimes he'll just swing and miss for the fences, man, and this is one of them, because I felt like he was just being weird for the sake of weird, and that's not what this role is all about at all. Like, this role is supposed to be a badass dude, a stunt man. Instead, he made it a weird dude who's drinking Skittles from or jelly beans from a fucking martini glass, and he's watching monkey shows all the time, and he's very distant, and he's borderline. I don't know. Is he like? Does he have Asperger's syndrome or something? It just seems like the first half of the movie he was completely, I don't know, not a human. He was not acting like a human being at all. He was just being weird for the sake of being weird, and it just totally killed the experience. And then I don't know, man. This guy who directed Daredevil as well, I don't know. I think he thinks of good ideas, but then just doesn't know how to execute them. And then you get a movie like this where it's just the performances are all over the place, and you got Peter Fonda as Mephisto, aka the Devil, or something like that, and his performance is not even serious at all. It's a joke. Like, he doesn't even know how to act evil. He's just spewing lines, and it felt like Eva Mendes was just being pure cardboard and just reading lines, so stiff, and the guy doesn't know how to direct actors. I think that's the clear thing. I think that's what's going on with this guy as a director. And you saw it with Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck basically had to direct himself, and Favreau had to direct himself. In this case, you got Nick Cage directing himself, and now he's drinking jelly beans from a martini glass. I don't know.
So Nicolas Cage, of course, is the titular character. We get the first 15 minutes of this movie. It's funny that Nicolas Cage is listed as the star, but if you watch the first 15, yes, that is 15 minutes of this 1 hour and 50-minute movie. I don't know if they were influenced by Batman Begins and the idea of, we're going to just wait a really long time until we actually get to see Ghost Rider. We're going to try to tell this story. But the first 15 minutes of this, I mean, you wouldn't even know who the actual stars of this movie were. The one thing I will say is that the actress that they got to play young, Roxanne Simpson, is a dead ringer for Eva Mendes. So good on them for casting those in that way. So what did you think of the first 15 minutes? And it's really interesting to me that the first actor, whose name escapes me at this point, was very wooden and just was like a CW cardboard cutout.
Listen, they're trying to do so much in the first 15 minutes to give you this origin story and give you all this backstory. Ironically enough, you mentioned Batman Begins. The guy who played Thomas Wayne in Joker, he's his dad. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, that's kind of funny casting. Hindsight 2020. But Yeah, man, I just felt like they were just rushing it, and then I was looking at the clock, and I was like, God, are they going to transfer over to the current timeline yet? And then, I get what they were doing. It's supposed to be like this Jekyll and Hyde, a little bit of American Werewolf in London, where you kind of build up the first transformation. I get what they were going for, but it just doesn't work because, well, we get to that in the tech part, but the CGI looked horrible when you finally transform. But just the build up, and then he's just so unlikable. This guy, the character that this Johnny Blaze, that this version of Johnny Blaze that Nick Cage portrays, he's just so unlikable. Like he treats his coworkers and his employees like shit by not telling them what's going on, and I hate bosses who do that. So yeah, man, and then with the origin story too, it just felt like, I don't know, like it doesn't work as a, if you're gonna do an origin, just kind of do flashbacks. I think if you just started from the beginning in this case, it just feels dragged out, and it's like, what's going on? Where's Nicolas Cage? How long are we gonna stay in this? And it just also felt weird too because the kid at the beginning, the young Johnny Blaze, doesn't even feel like it's the same person compared to the Johnny Blaze that's the adult version with Nick Cage. So again, just inconsistencies with the acting, and it just, I'll give you the credit for the dead ringer on Eva Mendes, but other than that, like, I've seen Eva Mendes in way better stuff. She's way better in the other guys. Like, she's even better in Too Fast, Too Furious. But goddamn, like, there was no quality control in these performances.
No, and Nicolas Cage is just being weird. He would get even weirder in the next one. Do we need to take a second to talk about his hair? Because I feel like this is an important element of his character, because Nicolas Cage, of course, no disrespect, but he does not have a full head of hair. And in this movie, he is very clearly wearing a toupee. And I don't know what it is with Mark Steven Johnson and directing lead characters with weird hair, but this was another instance of it, and it was made all the more distracting by the fact that he does not have a toupee in the next movie that we're going to review.
Not even that, the hair color didn't match. Like, his toupee had this deep, deep black color that doesn't even look like a natural black. It looks like, dyed black, clearly dyed black. But yeah, I guess he has this idea as a director that we got to kind of make it look like a comic book and kind of brighten things up and make certain aspects pop out. But you really don't have to do that, man. Like, I felt like he was overthinking some of the aspects of this, and that same thing with Daredevil, and just, you know, I guess he had like a lot of control over the visual, and that's probably why there's certain things that look the way they do, and like the especially when he's jumping over the stuff at the beginning, it just looked like a cartoon or something. Like, it looked like Speed Racer, which was about a year out, but it looked like something out of Speed Racer with these weird bright colors, and all of a sudden you go from that to this darkness with Mephisto and the demons and all that stuff. It was just weird, like this weird contrast that didn't match up at all, man. So I don't know, man. I just don't think he's that well suited as a director. Maybe consultant, executive producer, something like along the visual side, maybe. But other than that, I think he just doesn't get comic book movies at all.
To be fair, I think one of the things that I'm always taking into consideration is that he is a director, his name is on it, but we don't know what kind of studio interference this was. Of course, Daredevil, 20th Century Fox, we know how they produce things. The fact that Avi Arad's name is on both Daredevil and Ghost Rider, that could have undoubtedly had an influence as well. So I don't want to drop this all at the feet of one person, because as we know with these Marvel movies, it takes a village to really create something, and it really takes, the producers really do seem to have a lot of the control, as we've seen a notable difference between projects, at least a consistency difference between Avi Arad and, of course, Kevin Feige. I have to be honest, in watching this movie, there are a lot of elements of Venom that reminded me of this, just with the Nicolas Cage's lead performance, comparing it to Tom Hardy, the way that some of the villains were rendered, and even like the fact that there was you have a prominent female performer in a nothing role. You also had the wacky sidekick. You had that in Daredevil. You also had it here. Donald Logue is awesome. I really loved him in the first Blade, and I think he is perhaps the best part of this movie as well. I think I don't know, maybe Mark Steven Johnson should only cast the sidekicks in these movies, because he did a really great job with Jon Favreau, and I think he does a marvelous job here. I mean, Donald Logue is just exactly what you need for this kind of role. He is not somebody who's going to steal the spotlight, and I'm not talking about this in terms of Nicolas Cage's performance, which is to me a separate. Donald Logue is able to be comic relief. He's able to be support. I mean, you can't cast somebody better than this.
And he's the only one asking rational questions. You know what I mean? Like, he's questioning, like, "Hey, man, Blaze, you feeling okay? Why are you doing this? Are you feeling okay? You're looking kind of like distant out the window, man. He's looking out for him. And the performance kind of reflects like his kind of feelings towards him. And then yeah, it sucks at the end that he kind of fucking just died out of nowhere, right? That was such a cheap way to kind of put him out. But again, no appreciation for these side characters, I guess, and just they're there for you to laugh at and blah blah blah. But at least they did do that to Favreau with Foggy. But goddamn, he just got killed by some angel demon.
All right, let's come up with a score for the heroes. I'm giving this a 2 because I really did not like any of the performances, and I think most of the credit I'm going to give to Donald Logue. Oh, there's one person I want to mention, Brett Cullen. He is that guy. He's been in a lot of other projects, some of which we have talked about on this podcast. Brian, can you name 2 superhero-related projects that he has been in?
I'm trying to think. I can't even think of his face. Who's that guy again? What was his role?
He was Barton Blaze. He was the father.
Oh, okay. So besides Joker, uh, Dark Knight Rises, and
All right, and what's your score?
oh, just a one. Just horrible. It nearly broke me. And Nick Cage, man, look, he's great in Kick-Ass. He can do a comic book movie, I think. Just don't let him do whatever he wants, because it's not. It's sometimes it's just not good at all. And this was terrible.
All right, let's get to the villains. Not great either. We have Peter Fonda from Easy Rider, hence him being cast in Ghost Rider. There really isn't a lot to say. I think he's just hamming it up. He's literally collecting a paycheck on screen, and we will maintain our running gag when we get to the burning questions. Wes Bentley is kind of the real villain of this movie. He plays Blackheart, and it just seems convoluted to have 2 villains. This is yet another instance of having 2 villains and just muddying things up, and it's really unfortunate because I don't know what the right call is. You have a lot of weirdness with the CGI and things, and we could talk about this in the technical aspects, but this movie from a visual standpoint just has no distinguishable palette, and there is no distinguishable kind of vision for what this movie should look like. And I think you really see that in the villains because everything is just so forgettable. Like, I think back even just watching this days later, nothing is really sticking out to me except for Peter Fonda's look. And Peter Fonda looks like he's in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola movie. I mean, it's not very good, and the characters are just not very memorable, even less memorable than the heroes.
It's just wacky, total wackiness. Because listen, I've seen what's his name, Wes Bentley, and other things, and he can be a really effective actor. But in this, he just came off as like a goof, and like his performance came off so goofy and wacky. Peter Fonda's try to be the devil and this cool devil guy, but again, it's confusing because if he's the devil, then why can't he just do whatever the hell he wants? And why does he have to have Ghost Rider do his bidding? And what's up with like having this relationship with this son that wants to take over Earth? Or I don't know, man. Shit is wacky and crazy, and I just didn't care. Like I didn't care about if they won or lost. You know what I mean? And that's so rare for me to not care about the ending of a movie or just like, you know what I mean? I was just totally detached once I realized how ineffective these villains are and how poorly put together they are. So again, man, I'm going with another one. Just straight up horrible. Man, yeah, it was just, oh, man, especially Wes Bentley at the end, and he's trying to do this Dracula type performance, right? And it just comes off as goofy with his accent. So again, it's just like no one knows what the fuck they're doing with the performances.
I'm going to give this a 2 just for Peter Fonda out of respect, but this is not very good. And the thing that I'm having trouble with, and this is going to be reflected in both of these movies, there really isn't a lot to talk about. Like, a part of this is that we are grabbing at the bottom of the barrel here, and I'm having a really hard time getting into these movies because they're not good. And the thing is like 1989 Punisher, there was something to glom onto. Even Daredevil, for the mixed bag that it is, there is something to grab onto. This story, there's nothing to grab onto. It is as basic and cut and paste as you will ever find because, Johnny Blaze, he sells his soul to the devil and he becomes a warrior and then he has to fight people. And it's just this very generic plot. And the love story is also very generic because it's one of those things where you get to a point where he has to try to tell Roxanne that he is Ghost Rider, and he does it in the most unconvincing manner. And it's just that scene that I'm thinking of is so bizarre, and yet he still falls in love with him. And this character is such an indictment of the way the female characters are portrayed in these movies, because Roxanne comes across like a total doofus, and it's terrible because Eva Mendes is better than this. She is significantly better as a performer based on what I've seen in Training Day, based even off of what I've seen in Hitch. This is not good. This is very, very bad. And there really isn't a whole lot that I can say about the story other than it's very, very generic. And you can have a generic story at times, and if you have the right performers, because let's be honest, not all of the MCU movies are original. They're not these great bastions of storytelling. But what they are able to do is that they are able to have engaging performances, engaging characters. The thing that I've realized in doing this podcast over 2 years, what makes a good movie, what separates a good movie from the bad movie, is really not the plot. Most of the plots are pretty cut and paste. It comes down to the characters. If you don't have good characters, you will have a bad movie. This movie does not have any memorable characters. The performances are bad, and thus you have a really bad story.
Not even that, the story's so convoluted and ridiculous. You know what I mean? By the end, it's like I'm so confused as to what Mephisto really is. Is he the devil? If he's the devil, how come he doesn't have this power that the devil should have? Or I'm so confused about that whole situation. Why is Eva Mendes like coming back to this guy after all this time, and like, just seeing the way he's treating her and the way he treats people, just nothing makes sense, man. And it's unfortunate that I don't know I don't even think they. Oh man, it's just something about the direction with the acting, I think, that just totally derailed it from the start. And even with the story, it's just so frustrating. Because by the end, I'm just like, okay, so he says he's going to take his power back, but he doesn't take his power back? Or Mephisto has no power to take Ghost Rider's power back from the power that he gave him? I don't know what the fuck is going on, man. Because by the end, you got, Peter Fonda there frustrated and saying, I'm going to get revenge on you, and I don't know. It just seems like you're the devil. What are you just standing there for? You're just gonna let him just take this power and fuck off? Like, what the hell's going on here? It just was just making no sense, and I was just so frustrated with this movie. So again, another one.
I'm giving this a 2 as well because, I mean, it's not great. I think there are a couple of scenes when we see Mac and Johnny Blaze relating to each other. I think those are some of the more interesting scenes of the movie. I almost, if Mac was the romantic co-lead, I actually think this movie would have been better.
Yeah, probably. And then we forgot to mention, I don't know, we forgot to mention Sam Elliott because, like, goddamn, man, um, he had a good 5 minutes. He had a solid 5 minutes, and that was about it. And then we got very little backstory and why he did this thing with.
His narration, though, the narration in this movie is absolutely absurd. But Sam Elliott, bless him, makes it work. I mean, just that voice, just having him in this movie makes a difference. And that is another reason why I'm not giving this a 1, is because of Sam Elliott. But believe me, a 2 is still pile of shame worthy, and I can kind of see where this is going. But, I mean, Sam Elliott, God, any movie he's in, just having him say words emanating from his mouth is amazing.
Barnyard. That's all you need to know. Barnyard. He made that movie, and it was so bad, but he made that movie work.
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't a lot else to say. Sam Elliott is great. Nothing else about this movie is any good. The technical aspects, I mean, I think it looks terrible. I think the Ghost Rider effect, and Brian, you are the costume/suit expert, so I will, of course, let you pontificate on the Ghost Rider effect. I don't think it works out very well. There are some very crappy needle drops, some kind of pop hits, metal hits. The pacing of this is very odd. As I mentioned, the first 15 minutes are very oddly placed because they're trying to tell this story, and then they get into kind of what's going on with the adult Johnny Blaze, and it's very uninteresting, and yeah, it's not very good. So I'm giving this another 2.
Yeah, we mentioned the toupee and the hair color not matching. We also we got to mention how the motorcycle looks completely like a cartoon, like CGI cartoonish, and then the way he transform again looks like a CGI cartoon. It's almost as if it's better off they would have just made an animated movie, and I think it's going to be a lot more effective because at this point I think it's almost impossible to do a really good. I mean, I haven't seen. Look, I know he was on Agents of Shield, but I really have not convinced that you can do a good looking Ghost Rider suit with him with the flame and the skull on because it's just gonna look like CGI the whole time, and then once you stare at it for a long time, you realize it just comes off kind of fake, and that's what happened in this movie, like big time. And the fact that it, for some reason, it's like kind of shiny and glossy, and I don't think a flaming skull is supposed to look so shiny and glossy, like so computer generated, and that really messed it up. So, and the soundtrack is terrible. This soundtrack should have been something more like an Easy Rider soundtrack. If you're gonna do Peter Fonda, do an Easy Rider type soundtrack. But they just, did traditional and some of that alt rock from the 2000s era and mix that in, and it just doesn't work. So overall, another one for me. Just so disappointing. And then staring at that CGI skull, just really, just kind of like, okay, you should have just made it animated because it looks like a cross animated movie with live action, and it should just look seamless live action. But again, I don't think it's really hard to pull off with that skull.
Absolutely. Let us get to the legacy. I'm giving this a 2 because it's very forgettable. It doesn't have much. There really isn't that much else to say about it other than it's an irrelevant history piece of Marvel. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that yes, there is a sequel, but it's weird to put this into words because I feel like with Daredevil, you've got the Ben Affleck, Colin Farrell thing going. With the Punisher movies, there's something there. There's just nothing about this movie or the second movie that is interesting. There's literally nothing notable about either one of these movies.
Yeah, this will be my highest score. I'm gonna give it a 2, only because it produced a sequel 4 years later that I was stunned was even made. But it produced a sequel, so there you go. So my total score is a 6.
My total score is a 10. I'm 4 points higher, and this still cracks the pile of shame with the 16. Very well deserved. Let's see if we can break the month-long record by talking about the second Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. Now, Brian, I have to be honest with you. I couldn't remember whether I saw this movie. I definitely saw the first Ghost Rider at some point in the past. It was not in theaters. Spirit of Vengeance, I don't remember if I saw it, and I'll be honest, I still don't know if I saw it because to me, the major note that I wrote down under the story, Brian, what do you have it in front of you? I'm going to let you read it.
Hang on. Uh, Wait, what are you talking about? I have
The
here.
story section, the story part of the notes, I wrote something very specific down.
It's fucking Logan except bad.
What do you think of that statement?
I was thinking the same exact thing, but listen, they also mixed in the Omen, which made it even worse. So there you go. It's the Omen meets Logan, but it's it's way worse than all of them combined. It's just like, why would you do that? I don't know, man. Shit was wacky. But the only thing I'll give this movie credit for is that if you've ever wanted to see Idris Elba be James Bond, watch the first 2 minutes of this movie, and then instead of when they cut to the opening credits and you hear Nicolas Cage's weird voice, just put in a random James Bond song, and boom, there you go. That's the closest thing you'll ever get to an opening with James Bond and Idris Elba as James Bond. So there you go.
Yeah, I guess that is kind of the one positive aspect of this movie. Let's talk about Nicolas Cage. Oh my God. Do you know what scene I want to talk about first, Brian? Because we're kind of gonna go out of order. He doesn't have his toupee. He's off his rocker. His powers have kind of morphed into something completely different, where he's kind of absorbing the souls of evil people, and he has tried to self-isolate and self-quarantine himself. Something, Brian, we all know how to do now, because we might infect or hurt others. But do you know what scene I'm thinking of, where Nicolas Cage very specifically is off his hinges?
When he's yelling at that dude and his face is changing with all the weird CGI and it's just completely a mess.
There are two listed directors for this movie, and I'm not convinced that either one of them had a hand in that scene. Because Nicolas Cage, when I say he's off his rocker, he is fucking insane in that scene.
What's amazing is that a couple episodes back I mentioned Crank, and guess what? These are the directors, man. They directed Crank, so everything's coming full circle without me realizing it on this fucking podcast. But man, I asked for it when I mentioned how much I like the original Crank, and it just doesn't mesh well with this genre at all. It's just so fucking. I mean, you can tell like they had the action stuff like cheaply down in their head, which was what they were supposed to do with this given low budget. But they just let Nicolas Cage do whatever the hell he wanted, and he's doing these weird faces, and it's just like, okay, man, I get it. You're weird. You got this thing inside you, but you're just doing too much, man. And he just did way too much again.
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't a whole lot to say about some of the other characters. Naughty is a damsel in distress. There's more crappiness with female characters and lack of female agency, which is representative of both movies. Moreau is kind of there. Idris Elba is one of those guys. I love him in The Wire. I think you and I are both huge Wire fans. His character in that show is impeccable. He, spoiler alert, may very well have the greatest death scene in the history of television. And that is not an exaggeration. The way that Stringer Bell goes out is absolutely incredible. If you look at his IMDb page, at everything else besides The Wire, it is like a morgue of terrible B movies like this. I'm talking The Dark Tower. I'm talking about this. I'm talking about so many bad movies. Hobbs and Shaw. He's been in a lot of bad movies, Brian.
But they pay him, so they know what they're getting, man. But I mean, from what I've heard, he's still amazing on that BBC show Luther. So at least he's still doing some credible stuff. But I mean, we all know him as Hemdahl, and yeah, it's unfortunate too. Like the weird timing again with this podcast that he just got tested positive for the virus. So yeah, just everything is just coming full circle on this podcast at the wrong or right timing. I'm not sure anymore. But yeah, it's unfortunate that he had to sit through all this. But hey, he got paid, and I think he was trying at least. Um, yeah, and this was like the same year as Thor, so at least he was on his way up. But at least in Thor 3, he was really good, so I'll give him that. But yeah, this was just terrible.
Thor 3 was undoubtedly, it might very well be the best movie he's been in. I would have to look very closely at his IMDb. I'm giving this a 1, and this is going to be a score that you're going to hear quite a lot from me, and I'm sure you're in the same boat.
Actually, this will be my highest score. I'm going with a 2, only because of Idris Alba and the first 2 minutes giving me that James Bond idea that a lot of us fans have been wanting to see. And I swear to God, just put a soundtrack to that and just don't cut to the opening credits and cut to a different James Bond credit, and you'll be satisfied.
So then the villains, we have Ciaran Hinds. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. My apologies. He plays Rourke. He basically plays the devil. And there is this intimation that there are a number of devils. And Jerry Springer in 2011 was shown. It was really, really strange. Hinds is that guy. He's been in a lot of projects playing very similar roles, and he's very forgettable. So it was shown that Christopher Lambert was going to be in this movie, and I get very excited because Christopher Lambert's very good. He has a personality. There is something to him, and then he is almost unrecognizable as Methodius, and it's really bizarre.
Yeah, let's kind of like backtrack a little bit because what they did was they kind of retconned Ghost Rider 1 a little bit, and they kind of re-show the scene of him doing the contract and the deal with the devil, but instead they do it completely different, where he's actually as Rourke this time, and not as Mephisto, the Peter Fonda version. So it's almost as if they did the Evil Dead thing, because if you're familiar with Evil Dead 1 and 2, Evil Dead 1, ends completely differently. When you lead up to at the beginning of Evil Dead 2, they have to retell it because they didn't have the rights to Evil Dead 1. So they retold it instead of 4 characters, they cut it down to 2 and redid the whole first movie in the first 2 minutes and kind of retold everything. So that's what they did here. which makes even I don't know. It's even more confusing because I'm trying to think. Well, if this guy's the devil and he's been around for 4 years, how come he just hasn't gone up to Ghost Rider and taken his powers back again? So again, it's just so confusing. Why does he need this other dude to go get this kid Danny for him? I don't get it. And then you got this dude who dies, and then he brings him back to life, who gives him the power of decay. And it's like, dude, you could have just did that yourself if you got all that power, man. Why do you need this scrub to do this work for you? And then you got him like decaying people to death. She was crazy. And then you got Christopher Lambert, and then of course I think of Highlander, and then I immediately think of Mortal Kombat right after that, and him saying, "Goro can be killed." And that's kind of like my go-to line with Mortal Kombat and Christopher Lambert as Raiden. And yeah, man, I'm going with a one again, just because like everything was so confusing and terrible, and that dude who made everything rot and decay was just so lame and just a terrible performance by him. And then we'll get to the tech part of that, but that makeup was awful.
Yeah, I'm also going to give this a one. I almost completely forgot about Danny at many points, and it seems like the movie was trying to do the same again. It's coming back to this idea of being Logan and just like dragging Ghost Rider out of retirement, just like they dragged Logan out of retirement. And I know that Logan is a very common story that you will see in Westerns. It's just this movie did not pull it off very well. And as we talk about the story, I mean, Nadia and Danny are put in distress so many times that it doesn't even feel like it's a Ghost Rider feels like he's a supporting character in his own movies at times.
Yeah, it was really weird. Again, that's where I mentioned the Omen. It's like this is the devil's son or whatever, and they need him for a ceremony and blah blah blah. And there's like this, not necessarily a cult, but like this group of people, and it's like, oh my god, it's fucking all over the place. They're trying to do horror, they're trying to do a biker movie, they're trying to do a little bit of western, and it's just the wrong genres to mix up, man. And I don't know. Again, this should have just been an animated movie and simplistic and watered it down a little bit, and just again, it's just like they try to do crazy action, but it doesn't work with this. So, and then the whole idea of him losing his power only to just get it back later in the most bizarre way from the kid who apparently has the same power as his dad, Mephisto. I don't know, man. Shit was crazy and wild.
It certainly was. I don't even know what to say. That scene with Methodius, I mean, it's just it was the whatever the opposite of entertaining is that is what it was. And oh my god, I mean, this movie just, I mean, it broke me. Like it was, it's kind of been hard to concentrate on movies the last week for obvious reasons, but I mean, this movie was just it. This movie's 90 minutes, and I think it legit took like 2.5 hours to watch.
Luckily, I just sat through it 90 minutes straight, and I was just kind of like zoning out at times, but I made it through it just thinking about like, well, at least I thought about Mortal Kombat for at least 5 minutes when Christopher Lambert was on screen. I thought of Highlander, I thought of Queen, all just to distract me from what the crap was going on the screen and all that. I mean, we'll get to the visual stuff, but God, that Hakushi tattoo, Jinsei Shinzaki, that's a WWF deep cut.
I was going to say the same thing, but I did not want to because I feel like it might be racist. I don't even know if it's racist, but it feels wrong.
I guess, but that was the first visual image that I thought of because, God, he just had writing all over him. But yeah, story wise, I'm going with a one. It's just ridiculous, man. Like again, like the devil's the bad guy again, and then at the end, Ghost Rider kills him. So did Ghost Rider kill the devil himself at the end of this movie? It's like, what the fuck is going on? Did he just kill the almighty devil, Satan, Mephisto, whatever you want to call him, in the middle of this fucking desert, and everything's just a-okay now?
I presume so. The devil is dead, and I don't know. Like, is there a heaven? Is there a hell? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. Remember, Brian, there are no more rules in this world we live in. There are no more rules.
Apparently so, because AMC is closing down for 3 months, and they're still charging for the stubs.
All right, so this movie was made for about $20. It looks very, very cheap. Awful score. Brian, we have gone 35 minutes and we are almost done with two movies. That should tell you a lot. I'm giving this also a 1.
Yeah, again, I don't know how it was 4 years removed and the CGI is even worse. Like, how does that even work, man? Like, again, like it just looks like a cartoon, and it should have just been a cartoon. And I mentioned the terrible makeup job on that dude who decays people. He's got this weird white makeup going on and this really shitty white wig, and it just made no sense at all. And then we mentioned Christopher Lambert with the writing on him and these priests that are just isolated in this cave, and they want to kill Danny because they figured that would probably save lives and stuff like that. And probably they were right because they, I don't know, man. That kid really sacrificed a lot of lives just for him to stay alive. So, tech wise, again, the soundtrack was awful. So I'm going with a one. Again, man. God damn, this was awful too.
It wasn't good. That's all I could say. This is not a good movie and should never be watched by anyone ever again. And the legacy is reflected. I can't believe this movie came out 8 years ago, and it may as well not even exist. I'm giving this a big fat 0. My technical score is a 1. My legacy score is 0.
Yeah, Legacy one. You know my rule about giving zero, so one is the lowest they'll go, and yeah, that again, total six for me.
My total score is a 4. This is a double pile of shame episode. And really, I can think of no two movies that deserve it more than this. These movies are complete and utter trash. I think we have certainly reviewed some bad movies before that have in some cases been very memorable. But I feel like this month has broken me between the 1990 Captain America, between these two movies, even the 2008 Punisher to an extent. Brian, this month has broken me, and I never want to speak of any of these movies again. And we should have done a better job of organizing so that we didn't save all this crap for the end, because this month has made the podcast feel like a legitimate chore, and that's unfortunate because I really do enjoy doing this, but this month has kind of not been fun.
Well, it's one of those things where eventually I would have watched these movies anyway. You know what I mean? But at least I got them out of the way now. I mean, you know I was dreading the Ghost Rider movies, and I was right. I was fucking right, and I avoided them for so long. But it's okay because now I know. Now I know, and hopefully, I mean, we will eventually in the next couple of weeks, maybe in the month or so, get to Kick Ass, and there we will see a very, very great Nicolas Cage performance in a comic book movie. Because in this case, he's not, doing whatever the hell he wanted. In that case, he was doing an Adam West impression. So.
All right, let's get to the burning questions. What happened to Nicolas Cage's toupee between the first and second movie?
Retcon. They just retconned it and got rid of that shit and just gave him a natural hairline. That's what I'm assuming based on the beginning of Spirit of Vengeance when they retconned the whole contract.
Yes, I would totally agree. It's just a retcon. I would like to think that it became sentient and just flew away at some point, but the retcon sounds like the correct answer. What did Sam Elliott do with his paycheck from the first Ghost Rider movie?
I'm gonna say he bought a guitar, a really cool guitar, and then used the guitar to write some music because he does a really awesome cover of "Won't Back Down." And I'm not sure if he played the guitar on that one, but I just want to assume he does because he seems like a cool guy that is very well rounded. So,
Uh, I'm gonna 2 words: mustache, comb.
oh yeah, you need some cream for that too to keep it kind of, shaped.
Yeah, I mean that is an epic mustache, man. You can't. He's probably buys the most. Like his combs probably cost more than the outfits that we are currently wearing.
Yeah, I'm surprised we didn't say sarsaparilla juice or something.
Is also very possible. What is the worst scene in either movie? For me, it is the scene that I mentioned, Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. Very closely followed by the scene in the first one between Roxanne when Johnny Blaze tries to explain that he is in fact a demon.
I think the scene that broke me the most was seeing Johnny Blaze for the first time as Nick Cage and or Nick Cage's version, and then him just being on the bus and eating or drinking jelly beans from a martini glass and acting really weird and laughing at these weird monkey shows on television. I'm just like thinking like, okay, this is off the wall. This is off the rails, and I thought that immediately right there, I almost broke. So I'll go with that one.
Why can't Idris Elba be in good movies? Get a better agent, please.
I guess he's just, typecast, and then because of his look, they can kind of typecast him in these certain roles. Maybe he just doesn't care and loves taking a paycheck. Maybe he's just satisfied with doing smaller things and getting credit for that, like Luther and The Wire. But I don't know. Something's gonna break. Maybe he'll do something cool. You never know. But at least we got Thor 3.
That is true. We do have Thor 3. So technically, Ghost Rider has been in the MCU on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show. I'm saying, again, the word technically. But let me ask you, Brian, can Ghost Rider enter the MCU outside of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I mean, you can. It's got to be the right tone and the right kind of. It's got to be something related to like a Western kind of feel or something kind of like a road biker kind of feel. Something related to one of the other SU characters that kind of fits that. You don't want to force it. You know what I mean? Because then the tones won't match. And then my only worry is again just the CGI look of this fucking flaming skull, and without you being distracted the whole time, because it just seems by like the first like few minutes and you see it for like a constant time, it's like okay, it just looks like a fake fire and it's just too shiny and it just looks so fake. So that's my worry. But like I said, I think it just works more as an animated movie and just do something animated, like an R-rated animated something or other. I don't know, because it seems like you need the violence for this character and you need him killing people, obviously, and soul sucking. But you don't want to make it look like too goofy and cartoonish with this live action mixing with the bad CGI. So
Yeah, I think it's going to be really tough to introduce him. I don't even know how to do that. And I'll be honest, it's one of those situations where it sucks that Ghost Rider might not be around. I think it would be sucky for some people. But I feel like there's so many characters in Marvel at this point that have proven to be valuable to the MCU, will continue to be for the next few years. And there are some new, more diverse characters that are also being introduced slowly into the MCU. I don't know where Ghost Rider fits, and that's really unfortunate because I look at the Fantastic Four. They are kind of the original family of Marvel. And even though the Ghost Rider movies have been terrible, the Fantastic Four movies have been terrible, Fantastic Four has such a clear legacy within Marvel in the comics going back to the 1960s. And it feels like them entering the MCU is really significant because of who they are. And it just feels like Ghost Rider doesn't need to be a part of that anytime soon. And if any Ghost Rider fans are mad, I'm sorry, but that's kind of where I feel. I mean, this is a very hard character to put, especially by himself, especially being played by Nicolas Cage. Maybe there is a better performance out there, and there's some really good ideas, and I certainly hope that that's something that gets explored. But until then, I think Marvel just has way too much value in a lot of other people right now, and quite frankly, they just don't need this character in TV or movies.
it's too muddled. I mean, we just got the announcement of Blade, just last year in the MCU. So that with all these new characters and uh, Shang-Chi and all these different people coming in this new MCU, and it's just gonna be too much, and he'd probably get lost in the shuffle, the character. So I think it's probably a good thing to kind of step back, maybe just do its own thing. Like I said, animate it, keep it separate, um, and just let it be its own. Because mixing it up, I think it'll just be way too much, and you got like again, it'll have to be the right tone to fit, and it's very difficult to do that when you're kind of like this kind of violent R-rated kind of genre kind of throw it. I mean, we talked about it with Punisher. It's gonna be very difficult to kind of merge them in, but you can do it, I think, with the right kind of tone. Again, but I think it's even more difficult with Ghost Rider, to be honest. So
Absolutely. All right. So what we are going to be doing next week is we are going to be taking it off because we will be doing Breaking Bad the first Tuesday of the month. As for the year 2020, we will be doing Breaking Bad podcasts. It will be real bad, as Kevin Ford and myself will be hosting and talking about season 3. And I'm very much looking forward to doing that. We'll be recording that soon. And then when we come back in when we come back in 2 weeks, we will be going back all the way to 2019 and determining whether some of the 2019 movies should be going into the Pantheon or the pile of shame. And we are going to start with Glass. I am very excited. Legit. This is no bullshit. I am actually excited to be going back and watching Glass again and see how I feel a year later, because it really feels like people piled on that movie unfairly. And I feel like you and I were both actually in agreement, which is surprising to me. You and I both agreed that this movie is not nearly as bad as people made it out to be, and in fact had some very positive points to it.
Look, I enjoyed it a lot. I watched it twice in theaters. Well, I had to pass, but still, like I felt like I missed some stuff the first time around, and I felt like I was that young middle school kid enjoying M. Night Shyamalan movies and kind of breaking them down like I did with Signs and Sixth Sense and all those. Before when he kind of went off the good graces of all the critics and stuff like that before all that, and this is kind of like that old school Shyamalan kind of nostalgia kind of feel that I got from it. So I agree, man. I still have my similar feelings I did last year, I think, and I'm gonna watch it again and maybe even find more stuff to enjoy because I find a lot of the little details in the whole trilogy at this point very gratifying and satisfying, to be honest. So I love the full circleness of it.
All right. So for Brian, of course, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening to the show this week. We will return again. Everyone, make sure you stay safe.
Guns and wine. Sounds like social distancing.